The Passion of the Holy Martyr Barlaam the Elder, according to the Great Collection of the Lives of Saints by St. Dimitri of Rostov. The Holy Martyr Barlaam hailed from Antioch of Syria. He was already an aged man when he was seized by unbelievers for his confession of Jesus Christ, and led before an impious prince to be judged. Because he would not obey when the priests tried to persuade him to offer sacrifice to the idols, he suffered many stripes and torments for Christ his Lord. First he was beaten mercilessly with leather straps, and then scraped with iron claws. After this he was led by the impious into a pagan temple, where the persecutor forced him to stretch out his hand over the altar, upon which a fire burned. Burning charcoal and incense were placed in his hands, so that he would appear to offer the smoke from them to the vile heathen gods. The pagans imagined that the martyr, unable to endure the pain from the burning coal, would cast it in the incense before the idols. If he did this, they would then say, "Lo, you have offered sacrifice to our gods." But Christ's martyr stood like an unshakable pillar, stronger than brass or iron, and continued to hold the burning coal in his hand. Finally, the charcoal burned off his fingers and fell to the ground, but he never moved his hand, nor did he cast the charcoal and incense before the idols. Thus did Christ's unconquerable soldier show himself to be a brave sufferer. He surrendered his soul unto the Lord in a good confession. A homily on the Holy Martyr Barlaam, written by Saint Basil the Great. In the days of old, the deaths of the saints was honored with lamentation and tears. Thus when Jacob died, Joseph wept bitterly, and the Jews shed many tears over the death of Moses. Samuel's death also was honored with much weeping, but now it rejoiced at the deaths of the saints. For the nature of things sorrowful had been transformed by the cross. We no longer escort the saints to their graves with laments. We form choirs which sing divine hymns, because the death of the righteous is as a dream, or it would be more apt to say, a translation unto a better life. This is why the martyrs rejoice when they are slain. Their desire for that blessed life overcomes and puts to death the pain of death. The martyr regards not danger but his crown. He does not fear wounds but awaits his reward. He does not see his tormentors here below, flogging him, but contemplates the choirs of angels on high that wait for him to join them. He considers not his passing misfortune, but the everlasting reward. The martyrs, moreover, reap a glorious inheritance among us, since even from the grave they draw to themselves captives beyond number, and are acclaimed by us with exclamations of divine jubilation. Verily, everything that we have said thus far is true, in particular of the brave and manly Barlaam, who we now commemorate. The war trumpet of the martyr is sounded, and lo, as you see, the soldiers of piety have assembled. The martyr lies in the grave, but when his festival is proclaimed, all hasten to the church's arena. The valiant Barlaam is dead, but as the Master said, "He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live." Therefore, when Barlaam summons us to his spiritual banquet, those assembled praise and glorify him. It behooves us now to exclaim, "Where is the wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the disputer of this world?" It is a simple man who now proffers us the invincible doctrine of piety. The persecutors snared him, thinking him easy prey, but found the saint to be an unconquerable warrior, whose angelic bravery filled him with terror and who laughed at his senseless words. Neither did the martyr's demeanor correspond to his rustic speech, nor did his wise mind to his artless words. The second Paul could say with Paul, "Though I be rude in speech, yet not in knowledge." His tormentors wearied as they beat him, but the martyr only grew stronger. The hands of those who tore away his flesh became weak, but the will of him who bore this torture remained unbending. The blows Barlaam endured tore his sinews to shreds, however they left his firm faith untouched. Blood seeped from his pierced side, while his mind continued to bloom with wisdom. The greater portion of his body was destroyed, but the martyr was still so strong it seemed his contest had not yet begun. When the love of piety takes captive the mind of a man, he laughs at persecution, and the wounds he suffers do not cause him to grow faint, but harden him. The apostle's zeal bears witness to this, for when flogged by the Jews they rejoiced, and they departed from the presence of the council. It is written, rejoicing that they were counted worthy to suffer shame for his name. The soldier of Christ, whom we now extol, likewise counted torment as joy. He regarded the blows of him which he was showered as roses dropping upon him. He disdained the ignorant utterances of the impious judge as though they were darts, paying no heed to the billowing smoke of his anger, mocking the members of the persecutor's bodyguard for their bestial appearance. He trampled fear underfoot as if he were joyfully walking over a bed of roses. He was glad to be covered with wounds which he considered badges of honor, and rejoiced as he was subjected to the most grievous tortures, as if he were the recipient of decorations of the highest rank. He spat upon the bared swords of his executioners, as though they were softer than wax, and kissed as the door to his salvation the tree from which he was to be suspended and tortured. He remained joyous in imprisonment, regarding the dungeon as a garden in bloom, and all the tortures devised by the judge as flowers of various sorts, in which he took much delight. Finally, Barlaam's right hand proved mightier than the fire his foes applied to him. They lit a sacrificial flame to the demons, according to their custom, brought the martyr before it, demanded that he stretch out his hand over the fire, and wickedly placed burning incense in it, as if it were a censer of brass. They hoped that his hand would be overcome quickly by the pain of fire, and that he would cast the incense into the flames. Truly the schemes of the impious are beyond number. Since they said, "The countless wounds inflicted upon this obstinate sufferer have not bent his will, we shall employ fire to cause him to bend his arm. Since numerous torments have failed to remove error from his mind, let fire force his arm to remove itself from its place." Nevertheless, those wretched men failed to achieve their hope, for although the fire burned his palm, Barlaam's hand continued to hold the coal, as if it were already turned to ashes. His hand did not pull away from the heat of the fire, it did not flee, but remained where it was. Overcoming cowardice and bravely contesting with the burning coal, it gave the martyr occasion to cry out with the prophet, "Blessed is the Lord my God, who teaches my hands for battle and my fingers for war." The fire battled with his hand, but was defeated. War was waged between the flame and the right hand of the martyr, but the hand won an unheard-of triumph. The coal burned through the hand, but the hand remained outstretched for battle. O hand which prevaileth over the might of fire, O hand which refused to be subdued by the burning coal, a flame must suffer defeat by a palm of flesh. We know that iron gives way before fire and is softened. Brass is likewise overcome by the force of burning heat, and solid rock is rent in pieces by fire's power. But now the invisible might of fire fails to move the outstretched hand of the martyr. It would be fitting indeed for Barlaam to cry unto the Master, "Thou hast held me by my right hand, and by thy counsel thou hast guided me, and with glory hast thou taken me to thyself. What name shall we give thee, O valiant soldier of Christ? If we call thee a pillar, we greatly disparage thy long suffering. For if fire envelops a pillar, the column will be destroyed. But the burning coal shall prove unable to force thy hand to move at all. Shall we liken thee to iron? But this image also fails to do justice to thy bravery. Thou alone hast compelled fire to do no violence to flesh. Thy hand alone has remained unmoved above the altar. Thy flaming right hand has dealt a scorching blow to the demons, reducing them to ashes, crushing their regiments, and utterly blinding them. But why do I belittle the trophy bearer with my childish attempts at rhetorical acclamation? Henceforth I shall give a place to those whose tongue can praise him more worthily than mine. Come forth, O clarion-voiced teachers, to glorify the martyr. Arise now, all who wish to tell of the marvelous deeds of his passion. Adorn with your art my imperfect description of him who has been crowned. Illumine with the rays of your wisdom the faint image I have depicted. May your praises as is fitting the martyr's struggle and his triumph, and I will gladly acknowledge your victory. May I be granted to hear the contest of the saint's hand with fire worthily described. May I be permitted to behold more vividly portrayed him who entered the arena willingly. May the demons, still weeping because of the martyr's victory, be reduced to tears once more. May they again feel a victorious hand of flame upon them. May Christ himself, the governor of the contest, guide you in depicting such an image. Unto him be glory unto the ages of ages. Amen. A homily concerning the same holy martyr Barlaam, written by St. John Chrysostom. We have been summoned to the present celebration and festive assembly by the blessed Barlaam, not only to laud him, but to learn to imitate him as well. Not to remain hearers of the praises offered him, but to begin to emulate his most glorious deeds, In the realm of secular affairs, those who have reached positions of high rank do not always wish to see others attain the same estate as them, because the envy ever present among the worldly is a hindrance to feelings of love. In the spiritual realm, however, matters are entirely different. The martyrs consider themselves to be the recipients of the greatest honor when they see their fellow servants partake of the same blessings as they. Thus, let him who desires the praise of martyrs follow in the martyrs' footsteps. Let him who wishes to glorify those who contested for piety emulate their labors. This will be no less a cause for joy for the martyrs than their own good deeds, that you may be convinced that the saints consider it their good fortune when they enjoy a blessed state, counting this the greatest honor. Hearken unto Paul when he says, "For now we live, if ye stand fast in the Lord." And said before him, Moses said unto God, "And now if thou wilt, forgive their sin, and if not, blot me, I pray thee, out of thy book, which thou hast written." I do not wish to accept heavenly honors while they endure misfortune. The unity of the faithful is like that of the members of a body. What does it profit the head to be crowned when the feet are subject to torture? And how, one might ask, is it possible to emulate the martyrs when there is no persecution at present? I know that there is no persecution at this time, but there are opportunities for martyrdom. It is not the hour to contest in the arena, but it is the time to be crowned. It is not men who torment us, but the demons. You are not faced with the persecutor's wrath, but with the wrath of the devil, the cruelest of persecutors. No burning coals lie before your eyes, but rather the flames of passionate desires. The martyrs trampled live coals underfoot, and you must tread upon the heat of nature. They contended with wild beasts, while you must restrain the wrath of the untamed beast of anger. They stood fast against unendurable torments, but it is necessary for you to prevail against the vile and wicked thoughts which proceed from your heart. Thus will you show yourself to be an imitator of the martyrs? Since now we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. The desires of our flesh are fire, an unquenchable, undying fire. They are a fierce, rabid dog, which even if it is driven away 1,000 times, will return 1,000 times, will never cease to return. The heat of fire burns, but how much fiercer is the burning of our lusts? We are given no respite from this battle, no repose from the struggle, while we remain in this life. The strife never ceases. The crown, however, is brilliant indeed. Therefore, Paul counsels us ever to remain armed, because the foe never sleeps, and the struggle is always with us. Do you wish to be assured that the passions can burn no less than fire? Hear Solomon say, "Can one go upon hot coals, and his feet not be burned? So that he goeth in his neighbor's wife. Whoever touches her shall not be innocent." Do you see how desire is by nature like fire? It is impossible for a man to touch fire and not to be scorched by it. Similarly, he who looks without shame upon handsome faces is overcome more quickly than he would be by fire. A beautiful body is to the brazen eye like fuel ready to be consumed. Therefore, we offer not fuel to the passions by gazing upon the outward appearance of others. Instead, we should restrain our passionate desires, extinguishing them with godly thoughts, preventing the further spread of their flames, and guarding our mind always from falling. For when the mind is assailed by passion, the pleasure in which it revels burns it more fiercely than fire. Unless a man takes up arms against the thought besetting him, and battles it with patience and faith, just as Christ's valiant soldier, the blessed Barlaam, battled the force of the fire when it called to contest. When his right hand was subjected to torment, and the coal was placed in it, he did not surrender to pain, but manfully remained unflinching in its face, like a pillar devoid of feeling. Or perhaps it might be more just to say that while he felt pain and suffered, since it was upon flesh that the coal was placed, and not on iron, he showed himself to be far above pain, and suffering as the bodiless powers, although he wore mortal flesh. And now that the truth of our contention may be made even clearer, we should tell the history of his martyrdom. And if you pay close heed, you will learn how wicked are the snares of the devil. Some of the saints were burned in skillets, others placed in cauldrons, which had been brought to a fierce boil. Others had their sides scraped, others were drowned in the sea. Some were fed to wild beasts, some cast into furnaces, some had their members severed, and others were flayed alive. There were those who were placed upon live coals, and blood dripped from their bodies upon the coal, causing sparks to strike their wounds, tearing them open more savagely than the claws of a wild beast. For others, even worse tortures were devised. When the devil saw that the saints easily overtook these torments, making a mockery of them and greatly emboldening others to follow in their footsteps and to triumph, what did he do? He set a new trap, previously unknown, hoping for this to confound and frighten the mind of the martyr. For we can often endure that of which we have heard, and which we wait, even if it is hard to bear. But what is unexpected is more difficult to suffer, even if it is something less grievous. Let Barlaam face a new torture, said Satan. My novel invention will surely put my adversary to confusion. Next the foe had the saint brought forth from prison. This too shows his deceit, because he did not begin by applying the most dreadful tortures, but opens the struggle with lesser things. And why does he do this? The devil hopes that his adversary will be overcome by a lesser trial, for then his opponent's disgrace will be greater. But if not, and his foe prevails, gaining the victory, Satan expects that his strength will be spent by these lesser sufferings, causing him to fall more easily when afflicted by greater pain. It is for this reason the devil begins with what is less, and whether he succeeds or fails, he is not discontented with the result. If I conquer my foe, he says, I shall laugh him to scorn, and if I fail to overcome him, he will be too weak to withstand what I still intend to bring against him. Thus the martyr was led forth from prison, from which he emerged like a brave athlete who had spent much time exercising in a wrestling academy. The dungeon was a martyr's gymnasium, where he was trained for battle, conversing with God in solitude, and learning from him how he should prepare for the contest. For where fetters are present, so is Christ. The martyr came forth, strengthened by his long stay in prison. When he appeared, the wicked devil did not prompt his servants to tie Barlaam to a pillar to be tormented, nor did he surround him with torturers. He knew that this was what the saint had desired and long awaited, so he employed against the ramparts of the martyr's soul a new, unexpected weapon, hoping for this to bring them tumbling down. Truly, Satan usually seeks to defeat the saints by guile, and not by simply inflicting pain upon them. What was the deceptive weapon? The saint was commanded to stretch out his hand over the altar of the idols, and his tormentors placed in it burning charcoal and incense. They expected that it would turn his hand over in pain, and thus allow them to claim that he had offered sacrifice and fallen from the faith. Do you see how deceitful is the devil? But see also how God taketh the wise in their own craftiness. Satan's snares were rendered useless, and his wicked attempts to mislead the saint only served to greatly increase the martyr's glory. For when the adversary lays down numberless traps, but in the end is forced to flee, the struggler for piety emerges from the fray crowned with honor. This is what occurred in the present case. The blessed Barlaam stood firm and refused to move his hand, which seemed to be made of iron, although if he had done so, it would have been no sin on his part. But hearken now, so you may be convinced that even if the saint had turned over his hand, this would not have meant that he had suffered defeat. We must judge him exactly as we judge those who had their sides scraped or were tormented in some other way. If these have submitted and offered oblation to the idols, we would acknowledge this to be due to faint-heartedness, but since they did not endure till the end but sacrificed. If, however, they bore their torture and grew feeble because of their wounds, but without falling away from piety, no one would consider them guilty. We would exalt and praise them, since they did not fall away from God, even though they had grown weak. Likewise, if the blessed martyr Barlaam had proved unable to endure the burning of the coal and had agreed to sacrifice, he would have been conquered. But if he had turned over his hand without consenting to offer an oblation, he would not have sinned. In this case, it would have not been the saint's will that failed, but the muscles of his arm, when they drew back involuntarily from the fire. We do not consider it the fault of those whose sides are scraped if their flesh is torn to shreds. Neither, to use a more comparison which is more apt, do we blame those who suffer convulsions if their hands become misshapen. This is not due to some fault of theirs, but occurs because of the moisture in their tendons. which caused their sinews to tighten in an unnatural manner. Thus, had the saint turned over his hand, no one could blame him. If a fever can cause a sick man's members to cramp or convulse in spasms, certainly the live coal placed in the martyr's right hand would have done the same much more easily, even against his will. But it did not do this, so it was clear that it was the abundance of the grace of God strengthening the struggler, which had made good nature's shortcoming. The saint's hand overcame the inherent weakness of flesh and remained immovable, as though made of adamant. Who would not have marveled at seeing this? Who would not have been stricken with terror? The angels looked down from heaven, as did the archangels. The spectacle was amazing, and the capabilities of human nature were clearly surpassed. Who would not wish to have beheld this man's contest in battle, and remain proof against the effects of human suffering? He became altar, sacrifice, and priest alike. For this reason a double cloud of smoke arose, from the burning incense and from his flesh, which was melting because of the heat. And the fragrance of the smoke from the latter was more pleasing than that from the incense. What occurred here was like that which took place when the bush of old burnt but was not consumed. Because the martyr's right hand burned, yet his soul's resolve was not destroyed by the fire. His flesh melted away, yet his faith remained firm. The coal burned out his outstretched fingers and fell to the ground, but his spirit's bravery did not flag. Because his hand was made of flesh, it burned and fell away, but his soul desired that the other hand suffer the same, and manifest its patient endurance. When a valiant soldier has entered into combat with his adversaries, shattering their ranks, and his sword is broken by the many blows he has dealt them, he looks for another weapon, so that he may slaughter still more of his foes. Similarly, when the blessed Barlaam, in striking down the regiments of the demons, lost the use of his hand, his soul in its zeal wished to employ the other hand in the same way. Do not say to me that he only surrendered a single hand to suffering. Remember that before he gave his hand, he surrendered his head and sides to torment, and he endured, if not in deed, then at least in intention, every torture imaginable. Burning with fire, the attacks of wild beasts, being cast in the deep pits or the sea, the cross and the wheel, for the martyr must prepare himself not for certain torments only, but for whatever he might happen to suffer. He has no power over the schemes of his persecutors, and can neither dictate the sort of torture to be employed, nor the severity with which it is applied. He must rather be prepared to endure whatever evils his inhuman tormentors devise, and still refuse to do their own will, even when his flesh grows weak. So while Barlaam's flesh melted away, his mind, eagerly preparing itself for additional torments, shone more brightly by far than the live coal, for the spiritual fire within him burned hotter than the fire in his hand. The hot flame of Christ's love remained kindled within him, so the martyr did not feel the other fire in the least. Beloved, let us not remain content only to hear the martyr's deeds. Let us seek to imitate them as well. I repeat what I said in the beginning. Let us not glorify the martyr only at the present hour, while we find ourselves gathered together, but let each of us, as it were, take the saint with him to his home, or rather take him into his heart, by bearing in mind all we have said. Take him into your heart and place his outstretched hand there. Accept the crowned victor, and never permit him to depart from your thoughts. We shall bring you to the graves of the holy martyrs, and hope that the sight of their tombs will never permit you to forget them, and will stir you to require their zeal. If the word of the deeds of a great champion hardens a soldier, how much more will the sight of him do the same? Especially if the soldier enters the champion's tent and sees the latter's bloody sword, the severed head of the adversary, booty hanging overhead, fresh blood dripping from the hands of the trophy bearer, and lances and shields, bows and every other sort of weapon lying about. This, then, is the reason we have assembled here. The sepulchres of the martyrs are their war tents, and if you look with believing eyes, you will see here the armor of righteousness, the shield of faith, the helmet of salvation, the sandals of the proclamation of the gospel, the sword of the Spirit, and the head of the devil upon the ground. When you see a man tormented by a demon lying near a martyr's grave, looking upward and tearing at himself fiercely, know that it is the severed head of the evil one that you behold. These weapons now lie alongside the martyrs, for his rulers are accustomed to bury their bravest soldiers with their weapons. So Christ also buries the martyrs with theirs, to manifest their glory and might even before the resurrection of the saints. Understand then what are their spiritual weapons, and you shall depart from this place much profited, for you too, beloved, are faced with a battle against the devil, a fierce battle, I say, which never ceases. Learn to fight that you may prevail. Shun wealth and the other valued things of the world. Do not consider blessed those who possess the riches of this life, but praise those who succeed in withstanding torments. Bless not those who live comfortably, but those who are cast into hot skillets. Not those who sit at laden tables, but those who sit in seething cauldrons. Not those who pamper their flesh in baths, but those placed in roaring furnaces. Not those who smell of perfumes, but those who smell of smoke from burning flesh. It is this fragrance that leads to the honors and crowns of heaven. It is better and more praiseworthy by far than perfumes, which cause those who delight in them to fall into eternal torments. So that you may know how evil are luxury, the use of fragrant oils, drunkenness, and a rich table. Hear what the prophet says. The evil day approaches for those who sleep upon beds of ivory, and live delicately on their couches, and eat kids out of the flocks, and sucking calves out of the midst of the stalls, who drink strained wine and anoint themselves with the best ointment. If these things were impermissible under the Old Covenant, how much more are they forbidden by the New Testament of grace, which teaches a loftier wisdom? I speak now to the men and women alike, since they share a common contest. There is no division of male and female in the army of Christ, but a single muster. Women also can put on the armor of the Spirit, take up the shield, and let fly their arrows, both during times of persecution and at other times when much bravery is needed. For the holy martyrs and all soldiers of truth are like skilled archers, who when they release arrows from their bowstrings, spread confusion among the ranks of their enemies. When they take up arms against the devils, they loose from their tongues well-aimed words, like arrows shot from bowstrings. Flying through the air like darts, their words fall upon the invisible demonic army, spreading disarray throughout its ranks. The blessed Barlaam, too, loosed his forthright words like arrows upon the demonic host, striking it with confusion. Let us also learn to shoot the bow in this manner. Have you not seen how the spectators leave the arena? They seem somehow different than before. This is because they give close heed to the things that take place there. Even after they depart, they ponder in their mind the skewed eyes, the writhing hands, the twisted feet, and everything else they have witnessed as they beheld men's bodies suffering. It is not shameful that they pay such attention to the things done in the arena, ever preserving the remembrance of them in their minds, although they only serve to cause the perdition of their souls, while we fail to give equal heed to the things said here, though they permit us, if we do, as we have been exhorted, to be likened to the angels. I entreat you not to be so careless concerning your salvation. Let us keep the martyrs hidden in our minds, as also the cauldrons and the other instruments of torture used to torment them. Like painters of icons who are often commissioned to clean and restore panels blackened by smoke, soot, and the long passage of time. You also, beloved, should also wipe clean the darkened remembrance of the holy martyrs, whenever the world casts you into sorrow. If you preserve this memory in your soul, riches will not entice you, nor poverty will cause you to weep. You will have no regard for glory or power, nor seek after anything worldly. You will consider none of the beautiful things made by man's hand as desirable, and you will cease to say that life's difficulties are grievous to bear. Such are the lessons you will learn by ever bringing to mind the remembrance of this image, lessons which will enable you to prevail over every temptation and adversity. He who sees troops conducting themselves manfully in battle every day will never desire to live in luxury, nor will he take a delight in a soft, dissipated life, but will prefer to remain prepared for the contest, discipline himself strictly. What indeed do gluttony and valor, perfumes and arms, or feasting and warfare have in common? You, beloved, are Christ's soldier. Take courage and arm yourself, and do not trifle with the adornment and gratification of the flesh. For is this how we truly honor the saints, those brave soldiers, the garlanded champions, God's friends? Following the same path as they, we shall receive the same crowns. May all of us be deemed worthy to receive such crowns, through the grace and love of man, of our Lord Jesus Christ. Unto him be glory together with the Father and the Holy Spirit unto the ages of ages. Amen.